Today we're looking at the best starting 5 made up of players from each position. So we're going to be trying to make the best possible lineup using only point guards, then shooting guards, then small forwards, and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're just taking the top 5 from each position and putting them in a lineup though, because we have to account for how each player would fit into that position. So let's start first with point guards. Now for the point guard here, I think we had to go with CP3. He's revived his reputation recently this year and has proved that he's still a top point guard and leader in the NBA, and that leadership's going to be needed to play with 4 other stars and to make a lineup with 4 other point guards work. There was a couple of other options that I could have put into this spot, but I think for those reasons CP3 had to be included. Then for shooting guard, we obviously had to go with Steph Curry. Not only does he have the ability to shoot the lights out, but as we've seen, he's just as capable of playing off the ball and getting open looks on his own. And out of all the point guards in the NBA, he definitely made the most sense for this position. For small forward though, it might not be as great of a fit, but I had no choice. I had to put Damian Lillard in this lineup somewhere, and since the first 2 positions were filled up, he just ended up at small forward. But I mean, it could work. He's a great all-around player like most small forwards are, with his ability to shoot, drive, pass, and defend. And he's not a pass-first kind of guy, so it's okay that he's not actually playing point guard. And like I said, Steph's already got shooting guard locked up, so Dame fits best here. Power forward though is a better fit with Russell Westbrook, and he mainly lands here for his ability to rebound. He's only 6'3", but as we know, that doesn't make much of a difference for him. Plus, by not having him as one of the primary ball handlers, he wouldn't be able to shoot as often, which is probably a good thing for a team like this. Then the center position is definitely going to be filled by Ben Simmons, and I don't need to do too much explaining. He's 6'10", can post up big men, grab rebounds, and since he's not a great scorer, he can be used more for his defense and switching on to other players. He'll still be able to score when he's asked to, but with a lineup like this, he definitely won't be relied on for it. And with this being our final squad, it means we had to leave out guys like Kyle Lowry, Kemba Walker, Kyrie Irving, and Trae Young. And all of them were hard to not include. Lowry was easier, but Kemba is a better scorer than CP3, but we kept Chris for every other reason. We also didn't want Kyrie Irving's ego on this team because it might have messed things up, and we don't want him holding onto the ball and taking too many shots. And Trae Young would have made it, but he still hasn't had any success in the league. Plus, we already have Steph in his role. With a lineup of shooting guards though, things turn out a little different. And this one was tough. An easy decision though was James Harden at point guard, because we've already seen that he's capable of playing it and leading his team to wins while doing so. He can get nightly double-digit assists and get his teammates involved, hopefully. As long as he doesn't just stat pad and he helps his teammates out and scores just when he needs to, then they'd be set. Then Devin Booker had to be put in at shooting guard, and while him and Harden in the backcourt might not be too fun for the rest of this team, we're going to keep our hopes high here. Booker had to be included, and he fits way better at shooting guard than he does at any other position, so it only made sense to keep him here. Klay Thompson at small forward though would be a huge compliment to that backcourt, because he can play as a 3-and-D player like Harden needs, and play off the ball and make all the open threes he's going to get while playing with both Booker and James. Plus, he'll be the one supplying the much needed defense to a team full of shooting guards who aren't ever really known for their work on that end. Then for power forward and center, I mean, no one really fit like they did for the point guard lineup, so we just had to throw in 2 other top shooting guards in the league, and we went with Donovan Mitchell and Jaylen Brown. Now this was a tricky one, and Jaylen was probably unexpected here, but I originally had Bradley Beal in his spot, and it came down to the fact that even though Beal's putting up 30 a game right now, we got enough scoring on this team and needed more defense, which meant that Drew Holiday was also considered, but he's 6'3" and Brown's 6'6", so at center he'll be able to guard some of the bigger players better. Also, Donovan Mitchell made it over Bradley Beal because Mitchell brings his team wins, and I'd say he's a better teammate and leader. So that basically puts this 5 as a Rockets type lineup that doesn't play big men, but it was the best I could come up with. And it means we had to leave out Bradley Beal and Drew like I mentioned, along with DeMar DeRozan and Victor Oladipo. All the other lineups though don't really face the problem of not having a player for every position, especially the small forwards, because at point guard for them we obviously have LeBron, who's shown he can play the position all year long and is still leading the league with 10 assists a game. He's been a point forward all of his career, and him being so well equipped to play this position at 6'8" is one of the many reasons the small forward lineup is clearly the best of the video. The next reason though is because Luka Doncic is at shooting guard, and this is another perfect fit. I mean, his true position is small forward, but this year he's played everything from the 1 to the 3. He may be the primary ball handler night in and night out, but he's really just a positionless player, and it really doesn't matter where he is on the court. Plus, his near 29-point triple-double average would be a big difference maker. Then we had to go with Kawhi Leonard at small forward and let him play his natural position, since he's currently, in my opinion, the best small forward in the league, and his playstyle fits perfectly with a super team like they would have. I mean, we saw him win the All-Star Game MVP, and we saw how he excelled playing with the Spurs Big Three. His quiet and consistent offense and defense would really bring this team together, and pretty much the same thing can be said for Paul George at power forward. They both have similar styles and they don't play with a power forward on the Clippers that often anyways, so they'd be undersized, but it wouldn't affect PG too much to have to play at the 4. It would be a big change for Kevin Durant though to play center, but at 7 feet tall with the ability to post up as good as he can, he was by far the best fit for this position with his team. And he could do either that or play out on the perimeter to stretch the floor. And aside from that, this lineup has arguably 5 top 10 players in the league today, so they'd be unstoppable. And the only other great small forward we had to leave out was Jimmy Butler, who's also proved to be a great leader, but not good enough to take out any of these 5 guys. Then we move on to power forwards, and of course, the fits at each position aren't as great, but I gotta say I think it's still pretty good. Like with Blake Griffin at point guard. Probably not what you were expecting, but he's 6'10", and even though this season was rough and it's been filled with injuries, if we're talking about a healthy Blake Griffin that plays like we're used to, he can shoot from the perimeter, and he's one of the best passing big men in the league, which is gonna be his most useful skill set in this situation. Then we got Giannis at shooting guard, and again, you probably weren't expecting that, but the man can realistically be plugged in at any and every position, and that's what basically happened. He can't shoot enough for a shooting guard, but I basically filled up every position and then just put Giannis at whatever spot was left. And even here, he'd be just as dominant. Draymond Green comes in at small forward though, and in this lineup, he fits into a role like Andre Iguodala had on the Warriors, and a pretty similar one that he actually had at just a different position. As we know though, he wouldn't be expected to score a ton, because well, he can't, but he can do just about everything else. And I really almost put Pascal Siakam in this spot. I mean, he's the same type of player as Draymond, but he does it while averaging over 20 points a game. But I'd have to say Draymond's still the much better overall defender right now. And there's already going to be enough scoring in this lineup, so we'd rather have the better defensive Draymond instead of the better offensive Pascal. Then at power forward, Anthony Davis was the obvious choice, since he's the best power forward in the league and climbing that all-time list every year. And he's needed for this squad at this point, because Blake, Giannis, and Draymond all aren't great shooters. But he'll do a great job at stretching the floor and giving all the other guys opportunities to score in the paint, while Kristaps Porzingis really would do the same thing as the team's best 3-point shooter. And on top of all that, if this lineup's defense wasn't unstoppable enough already, nobody would be getting past Porzingis and AD down low. And this all makes for an unusual lineup, but honestly a pretty effective one. And with all of them included, it meant we weren't able to include guys like Jason Tatum, Kevin Love, LaMarcus Aldridge, or Pascal Siakam. Then finally for the center starting 5. And at point guard we had to have Nikola Jokic. He's the best passing big man in the game and would be the perfect fit to play point guard and run an offense on a team of centers. Plus, he's by far the best option in the league here, and there's no other centers that would even come close to being able to compete with him for just being able to play point guard. I mean, and he's still averaging a near triple-double with 20 points a game, and is just a few assists away from it. So if he did play point guard, he would probably average one. Then we're gonna skip the shooting guard position and come back to it last, because it only makes sense once the rest of the roster is decided. And at small forward, the best decision is to have the spot go to Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, he can play around the perimeter better and at a higher rate than almost any big man in the league, still shooting above 40% from 3 and averaging over 26 a game. He's been called overrated recently and missed the All-Star game, but he's still a top center and has a good skill set for the small forward position here. And we kept him there so Joel Embiid could play power forward, since he's the more traditional back to the basket type of big man and plays much better defense in the post. He can stretch the floor when he needs to, but he said consistently that he'd much rather play with his back to the basket. And that would work some of the times, but it also wouldn't, because they'd have Rudy Gobert playing at center. And he makes the most sense for that spot, to be the defensive anchor and finisher at the rim. It only makes sense to have him play center since his defense is next level and he can't stretch the floor like the rest of this lineup. But since Cat and Embiid can so well, it'd make a perfect combination. And this is why we had to save the shooting guard position for last, because the rest of the positions were filled so well, and now out of the 4 guys we have left to choose from, in Al Horford, Brook Lopez, Miles Turner, and Andre Drummond, we gotta give the spot to Turner. Drummond doesn't fit in as a traditional big man. Lopez would be a great fit as a shooter at shooting guard, and he's who I initially wanted to include here, but he's shooting a pretty low percentage this year. And we picked Turner over Horford because he's playing slightly better this season on both ends. So with Miles at the 2, he'd be the perimeter defender that could switch and guard any player on the court, and with a lineup full of slower big men, that's exactly what they needed. Plus, he's developed a solid jump shot over recent years. So like I mentioned, we had to leave out Drummond, Horford, Lopez, along with Nikola Vucevic. So there you have it. That's the best starting lineup made out of every position. Now if I had to rank them based on worst to best, I would have to say the shooting guard lineup, the centers, point guards, power forwards, then the small forwards had the best lineup of course. Comment down below though and give your rankings on these 5 lineups or anything you would have changed. Drop a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you next video.